Hello and welcome. Happy New Year 2026. It's crazy to just say that out loud. In today's video, I want to do a full comprehensive recap of my 2025. I know that some people like to do multiple types of videos to recap their year, which I love to watch. So some people do like end of year tags, then they do other videos for their top books of the year, then they do other videos for their worst book of the year, etc. I already did a tier ranking of all the books that I read in 2025, and today I just want to do a comprehensive recap of my full year where I look at a couple of stats from the previous year and then I tell you about my best books of 2025 all in one video. I do not want to do multiple videos, and the reason why is because I am so done with 2025. I am so ready to jump straight into 2026. So I kind of want to do it a one and done type of thing where I'm sitting here today. Let's chat about all the books that I read last year and then we move on to a new and better, hopefully, chapter. In 2025, I read 40 books, which is pretty good for me. I'm very happy with that number, especially because I'm a full-time PhD candidate. So I am quite busy. And my fall semester was absolutely bonkers, insane, crazy, and I'm surprised that I got any reading done at all. And obviously, I think a large part why I've been able to read so much is because I've done YouTube. And so because I've been doing YouTube about books, I really prioritized reading. So needless to say, I'm really enjoying making videos and reading because it's allowing me to read more and to think more about the books that I read. And it's just bringing me so much joy. Anyways, I've yapped enough. Let's get into the stats of last year. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the stats because I feel like it's much more interesting to just talk about the books themselves. But I do want to have like a general overview of how my year went. So I want to talk about the types of genres that I've been reading, the top authors of my year, my monthly reading habits, and then lastly, just kind of see where I'm standing with the star ratings. I will keep looking down because that's where my computer is. It is quite funny to me that now in 2025, I am predominantly a fantasy reader. So I read 27.5% of the books that I read were fantasy, which is great. And I'm so happy about that because in the recent years, I've come to really enjoy good, solid fantasy works. And I've come to find some really cool authors that I really vibe with. And I'll tell you in just a couple minutes who those authors are, one in particular. So I think that's no surprise that fantasy stands so high up on this list. It's very surprising that romance is at 22.5% because I have read, I think the majority of the books that I have read that are romance in my life have been read this year. I am not really a romance reader. I don't particularly enjoy romance, but there was one author in particular who I really appreciated this year. And I'll also talk about that author in just a bit when we talk about authors. And I'm kind of happy. I feel like at the beginning of the year, I just wanted to get a little bit more into romance because, you know, I always felt a little bit left out. I feel like everyone talks about romance and romance is such a big genre that is being consumed in 2025 and in contemporary times. So I just kind of wanted to be part of that. I just had a little bit of FOMO. And I feel like in 2025, I really gave it my all. I really gave it my all with different types of authors, different kinds of romance. I read, you know, YA, I read adult, I read holiday romance, I read non-holiday, I read it all. And I'm so happy I did because now I'm quite romanced out. I still want to read romance, but it's definitely not gonna be my top picks in 2026. So I'm really happy that I did that in 2025. Next, we have classics at 20%. This is not really a surprising thing for me because classics has been in the past the thing that I would mostly gravitate towards. I have started to slowly, as the years go by, just kind of not read as much classics as I used to. I did a whole undergrad in English literature, so I read a lot of classics. And I think I'm really enjoying my time now that I'm done with all that, reading more for escapism and just for pleasure. But I still really enjoy a good classic from time to time. So it's of no surprise that it's at 20%. And then we have equally horror, dark, and literary fiction at 12.5% both, which again are genres that are not like the number one thing that I gravitate towards, but are both types of genres that I enjoy. I just want to specify when I say horror, it's not actual like horror. I think the only actual horror that I've read are two books by Stephen King this year, but other than that, horror and dark more in the sense of gothic, spooky, Halloween type of thing. And then the genre which I've read the least in is sci-fi at 5%, which doesn't sound too much, but it's actually a lot for me because I've never read sci-fi before. This was the first year that I read sci-fi, and I'm very happy and proud of myself for doing that. The books that I've read in the sci-fi genre, not all of them I've loved, but there was one in particular that I really enjoy, which was The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu. And I have got more sci-fi books since then, and I am really excited to get into more sci-fi works in 2026 for sure. Okay, we talked about the genres. Let's talk a little bit about my monthly reading habits. So we have on the x-axis the months from 0 to 12, and then we have on the y-axis the number of books that I've read. As you can see, the maximum amount of books that I've read in a month are 7, which I read in April and May, and the remaining of the months were really not that many. I mean, averaging somewhere at a 3 books per month. And in June, I've read 0 books. It's very surprising because June was the month where I went on vacation, but a lot of things happened in June. So it's surprising because I was on vacation, but it's also unsurprising because it was a very eventful vacation and a lot of things happened. So yeah, I'm not too mad about that. The rest of the months, reading 3 to 4 books a month, I think it's pretty good. It means I'm reading somewhere around a book per week, which for me is a lot. And again, with how busy my schedule is, with how many things I have going on, I'm really happy. I feel like I've done a really good job at prioritizing my self-care, or my number one self-care, which is reading books. Talking about star ratings, I feel like it's looking good. They are a bit more skewed towards the top, and that's kind of normal because obviously I pick up books that I think I will enjoy, and I do normally research the type of books that I pick up. Not all of them, but most. I mean, I don't really pick up books that people say are bad. I also don't really pick up books that I'm completely uninterested by. So it's kind of normal that I'm going to end up liking the books that I read most of the time. So it's mostly a 4 stars. I did stop giving star ratings at some point. So I don't know if all of the books that I've read this year are included in here. They might not be, because I did not give star ratings for some of the books that I've read this year. I don't know. I just went through a phase where I felt like I was really focused on providing a star rating to the book while I was reading, and that really took away my attention from enjoying the story and actually focusing on the reading. I don't know, it was weird, but felt like that really helped me recalibrate the types of things that I was paying attention to while I was reading. So now I'm back to giving star ratings to books, but if it ever starts feeling unnatural again, then I'll stop. It's really not that deep. And now talking about the top authors. So these are the authors that I've read most from. So starting off with the least top author. So in spot number 3 comes Stephen King with 2 books. So this was the first year that I read Stephen King. I read Carrie and I've read Misery by him. Not my favorite books. I really enjoyed his writing. I think he's a really smart writer, but the content of the books was not that appealing to me. I did a full video where I kind of reported my experience reading these books, and I got a lot of great suggestions from people who are more experienced with reading Stephen King. So I'm really excited to take on those suggestions and in 2026 read more from Stephen King. Coming in number 2, the number 2 spot, we have Abby Jimenez with 4 books. So this was the romance author that I mentioned before that I really enjoyed. I found her writing to be so relatable, so down to earth. I felt like she just writes real characters and real human beings, and I felt like her love stories are making sense. They don't feel crazy, they don't feel taken out of proportion. They just felt very natural and very human. I love her writing. She doesn't take it to a place that is too emotional and too intense, but also she takes it at a place that is emotional enough to keep me intrigued and to keep me feeling like I'm not just wasting my time. And then the number 1 author, so the author that I've read the most from this year, is Brandon Sanderson with 5 books. I am so happy that this man is at the top of my list. I have discovered Brandon Sanderson, I think in 2024. I think I've read my first ever book from his in 2024, and I've continued loving his works in 2025. And I have plans for 2026 with him. Like, I'm just so excited that I found this author that I'm really excited to read from. His works are incredibly creative every single time. He does such a great job at posing really challenging questions throughout his novels and then answering every aspect of those questions that he is asking. So nothing goes unanswered, nothing remains blurry, or if something is blurry, you just know he is going to answer it in a future series or in a future book from that series. You just know it's a very intentional strategy that he's using to hook you in. His stories are just amazing, and I'm so excited to read more from him in 2026. All right, so now let's talk about the best books that I've read this year. I have narrowed down my list to 5 top books. But before that, I do have a couple of honorable mentions, books that were really, really, really good and I really, really enjoyed. And I think definitely I would like to recommend you to read them if you haven't yet. So before I delve into my top 5, let's just do a very quick speed run through my honorable mentions. The first book on the honorable mention stack is John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. This story follows 2 men who are very different from one another, but they both share the excruciating and difficult circumstances of being poor and being a laborer in the Great Depression. They go from location to location, ranch to ranch, trying to find a job and trying to secure a place for themselves to sleep. And essentially, they only have one big dream in their life, which is to earn enough money to buy themselves a little home, a little house to live peacefully the rest of their days. The character work in this book is absolutely insane. This is very short. It's just a little bit above 100 pages, yet both of the characters felt so real and so well developed. I had no question in my mind about who these people were and their aspirations. Everything that they did, every single action, every behavior felt real. The ending of this book is really, really touching, and it's just the book that I will be recommending for the next foreseeable future for sure. The next book in the honorable mention is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This was my first Ishiguro book, and I truly understand the genius now. This is a book that is complicated to give you a synopsis of. Every single page of this book feels like you are just unpeeling an onion, and every single page has new discoveries and new secrets. So I think it's the type of book that you go into blind, not knowing exactly what it's about. And it's also a type of book that you kind of have to brace yourself for a little bit of weirdness. Just expect it to cross some boundaries between different genres. It discusses ethics, it discusses history, it discusses memory, it discusses friendship in such a powerful way. There are just so many beautiful themes that are discussed in this book, and it's the type of book that I feel like I could reread every single year, and every single year I will get something new out of it. The next book in my honorable mentions will be The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. This is book number 3 in the first era of Mistborn. Now, to be completely honest, I do not know if this should be an honorable mention. I feel like it's a book and a series that really, really changed a lot of things for me in the way that I view fantasy, and it definitely changed my expectations in regards to fantasy. Like now, I feel like my expectations are so high when I read a fantasy book, and it's all because of him, all because of Brandon Sanderson. The main reason why I put in the honorable mention is because it's the book 3 in the Mistborn series, and the books that I'm discussing in my favorites, I wanted to kind of spend a little bit more time to develop the synopsis and tell you a little bit about what I liked about the book. And it's kind of impossible for me to do this with this because I would be giving you away spoilers about what happens in books 1 and 2. But this is a really good book. I really enjoyed how Brandon Sanderson concluded the series. Very masterfully done, very epic, very big. And Vin and Elend will be forever stamped into my soul as some of my favorite characters from a fantasy series. The next honorable mention is Dracul by Dacre Stoker and J.D. Barker. This book almost made it to the top 5, and I really, really, really enjoyed my experience reading it while I was reading. But then the more I sat away from it after I had finished it, I just thought that there were a couple things that were not perfect, but it was a really good experience reading this book. It's essentially a companion story to the Dracula novel written by Bram Stoker, and it's following the story of Bram Stoker himself, how Bram Stoker came to believe in vampires and how he came to write Dracula. It's very spooky, very on brand for October. I could not recommend this enough for the autumnal season. Now, for the last bit of the honorable mentions, I'm going to recommend a whole entire series, and that is the Part of Your World series by Abby Jimenez. I only have books 2 and 3. I don't have the first book from the series, which is very funny because it's my favorite one. But all 3 of these books are kind of set in the same universe-ish, like in the same world. And I know a lot of people say not to read these in order, but if you do plan to read all 3, I highly encourage you to read them in order, because by the end, I'm not going to spoil anything. Just read them in order, and at the end of the 3rd book, you will know why you had to read them in order. I'll just say that much. But these are incredibly well written. Both the male and the female perspective, I feel like they're really well developed in these books. I really love how she creates almost a sort of dance between the female and male perspective characters of these books. They're such a good escapist moment, and from here on out, I am an Abby Jimenez fan. Okay, we're done with the honorable mentions. Let's go through my top 5 books of 2025. And just to mention, none of these are in a specific order. Like I didn't really sit down and scrutinize which one would be 5, 4, 3, whatever. But the last book that I'm going to mention, the book number 1, is in fact number 1. That one really stood out considerably from any book that I read this year. This one is coming as a big surprise to me. I thought I'm gonna like the book, but I did not think that I will find so much to like about it. And this is The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kirsten White. This novel retells the story of Frankenstein, the original tale written by Mary Shelley, from a more feminist slash psychological, even I would say, perspective. As a child, Elizabeth is rescued from poverty by the Frankenstein family and living in a house where Victor's father, a tyrant, is in control. She very quickly learns that for her to be able to hold on to this opportunity that she's been given to live in a way that is comfortable, to live in a way that is placed in society, she has to be obedient and just very kind of demure. She grows up alongside Victor, and because of that, she really is able to notice some of his most dangerous traits. She's able to see how interested he is in death and how much negligence he has of other people's lives. But because Elizabeth's main motivation in life is to keep that security for herself, she essentially starts from a very young age to enable Victor to do a lot of things and always quietly intervenes to protect him and to enable him to continue doing whatever it is that his crazy mind wants to do. Essentially, the way in which I see the novel, it follows Elizabeth's internal descent alongside Victor's external descent. So Victor obviously is descending into madness, creating a monster, but Elizabeth herself is not that much of a saint. And this is really what I appreciated from this book. Although it's retelling the story from a feminist perspective, giving Elizabeth her own voice, I felt that it did so still with a good amount of criticism and responsibility, where Elizabeth becomes both the victim but also an accomplice to Victor's cruel endeavors. Undeniably here, Elizabeth is an agent. She has agency. She has choice. She makes strategic decisions about the thing that she wants to erase for others not to see of what Victor does. And she manipulates certain situations for her own benefit as well as Victor's benefit because she wants what's best for him. But by constantly enabling Victor and covering for him, she also absorbs the consequences of his actions, essentially. There are a lot of things that I like about this book. The writing is on point. The atmosphere is very gothic and spooky. Discussions about nature and the power of nature. But what I most enjoyed about it is really the complexity with which Kirsten White treats Elizabeth's character. Because I knew this was going to be a more feminist take going into this, I quite expected that Elizabeth would be portrayed as this meek, subservient victim. But I really enjoyed how Kirsten White really gave her a lot of responsibility for the actions which she enabled and which she contributed to in some sense as an accomplice. I thought that was very well done, and it really expanded her character into something more and better and more interesting, in my opinion. Book number 4 on the list is The Call of the Wild by Jack London. This is a book that follows an animal, a domesticated dog named Buck. At the beginning of the book, Buck is living very comfortably, domesticated in a ranch, but he is very soon sold into a very harsh life to be a sled dog in the north. In this new environment, Buck has to learn a lot of new skills that up to this point in his life were just unnecessary. He is dealing with starvation, he is dealing with beatings, he's dealing with cruel other animals around him, and just relentless hardship, both coming from actual actions that are done against him by humans, but also just nature's cruelty. Essentially, this follows Buck gradually coming into his own instincts. The aspect that was the most striking to me about this book, which really took it for me on a whole other level, was Jack London's refusal to sentimentalize what it means to be an animal and anthropomorphize how animals are described in books. Buck is not represented as your cute, typical animal that you find in so many different books nowadays. Buck is represented as an entity, a being that deals with hardship in a way that feels very primordial and very natural. He is a being that is subjected to nature, both to its beauty, to its freeing aspects, but also, of course, to its cruelty, which I thought was so well embedded in the story. Nature here is completely indifferent. It's indifferent to how good or bad of a dog or a person you are. It's indifferent to how kind you are to others. Nature is just a state, and you have to know how to survive it. The realism in this novel made this for me such an authentic story, an honest story. Even though nature is characterized as cruel and indifferent in times, to me, the way in which it was described by Jack London, it felt as though with all of that, it's also the most liberating, as opposed to, for example, Civilization, where it might seem for us humans that it's a good structure for ourselves, but to an animal, it could quickly just become a structure of obedience and cruelty and ownership, which is something that animals are not inherently meant to experience. I felt like this was just an ode to animals for being real beings, beings that exist in nature, beings that have their own desires, their own aspirations, no matter how different those aspirations are from what us humans experience. And overall, it just felt like a very powerful meditation on freedom. Let's move into something a little bit more contemporary. Number 3 is coming in with The Wedding People by Alison Aspatch. This book was the winner of the fiction category from 2024 on the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I read it for that exact reason. I wanted to see what the winner was and whether it was any good. Man, was it good. It was really, really good. It follows the story of an academic woman. She is a professor of literature and she is recently divorced. She's been dealing with quite a few traumatic events in her life, her divorce being one of them, another one being the fact that she's been trying to conceive a child with her ex-husband, which proved to be a very difficult experience for her. And essentially, she's just very depressed and she's quietly contemplating taking her own life. To do so, she decides that she wants to go to a very luxurious hotel where she's been meaning to go for a very long time and potentially do it there. So she arrives at a hotel, but the hotel is completely booked for a bridal party of a very huge, crazy, luxurious wedding. And very weirdly, she's the only person who is staying at the hotel who is not part of the guests of this wedding. As the days go by, obviously she starts to interact and meet all of the people that are invited to this wedding, including the bride, including the groom, including different people that are close to the bride and the groom. From all of the books in this top 5 list, I would say this book is the most approachable. It has the writing style of a contemporary novel, but it has so much depth and complexity in the themes that it explores. There's so many beautiful things and nuggets that are explored here. My personal favorite was the theme of motherhood. The reason why I really enjoyed this theme in this book is because I felt that the author delved into this theme with so much honesty. Motherhood essentially appears here through the perspectives of different women. That's really what nailed it down for me as a masterfully written book, because this is telling me this writer wants to explore something that is important to them in a way that is meaningful. They're not just trying to spoon feed me information and opinions about what they think about motherhood, but they're trying to really explore it in a way that is very complex and is considering that there's not really a version of motherhood that is more legitimate than another. We have Phoebe's story, who is trying to conceive but she's unable to. Is she considered the mother? Is she considered someone who can be nurturing? Another perspective to which we see motherhood is through essentially the mother who is not there and what sort of impact that leaves on a child. So the groom of the story has been married previously and his wife has passed away, but they did have a child together. And this child, this young daughter of theirs, through the book is going through an existential crisis, sort of. The author explores how her own identity is tightly tied to what her mom's expectations would have been of her and how she understands her own existence through the perspective of her mom, who is no longer there, which I thought was incredibly touching. And there are many other perspectives and ways in which motherhood is explored, but those two were just my favorites and made the story for me so impactful and so meaningful and so important to read. Let's move into book number 2 of this list, and that is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. The city of Elantris was once a city of almost godlike creatures. So people that were living in Elantris were huge, were immortal, were powerful, were rich, were beautiful, but a certain specific event happened in Elantris which made all of these people trapped into bodies that feel endless pain and cannot die. Essentially, everything that was big and beautiful about Elantris completely vanished, and the city rather became a sort of prison for people who are decaying. We're following mainly the perspective of Prince Rauden, who at the beginning of the story is thrown into Elantris because the curse that has been placed on Elantrians has also been placed on him, and now his soul is starting to decay as well. We also follow the perspective of Serene. I know some people call her Serene, but to me, she's Serene. And this is the fiance of Rauden, who is coming on a ship to meet the prince, not knowing that her prince is just about to be thrown into Elantris to be imprisoned there. When she arrives to meet him, she is being told that Rauden is dead, and everyone around her and everyone that knew Rauden also thinks that he's dead. Aside these two perspectives, we also have more complicated perspectives that come in with religious bodies that are overseeing the city and who are trying to gain control of the city with different religious traditions and myths. These stories really intertwine political intrigue and religious ideology, mystery. Everything is so masterfully plotted. The other books that I discussed today, I kind of just delved a little bit deeper into the themes that they develop. And although obviously in Elantris there's multiple beautiful themes that are developed, what I really enjoyed from the story is the most immaculate escapist moment. It's just a plot that is constructed in such a way that keeps you intrigued the whole time. It layers so many different tensions. Again, as I mentioned before, political, religious, social, romantic even, and it just makes it for a book that you cannot put down. What makes this plot so compelling is that each of these different plot lines that I've described are essentially operating independently. So we follow Rauden, who is trying to navigate this new environment in Elantris with people who are kind of zombie-like, and they're trying to figure out how to survive and to build a life for himself in a place that seems absolutely hopeless. Follow Serene, who's trying to go on a little bit of a mystery quest to find out what happened to her fiance. And we also follow a couple different religious bodies trying to take control over the city. And while all of these are independently developed, they soon start to intertwine beautifully by the end of the book. So we've made it to book number one of my 2025, and that is 1984 by George Orwell. Man, did this come as a surprise to me. I am not a huge dystopian political type of reader. These are not the type of books that interest me, but this is so much more than that. This is a social, political, historical commentary and also a very psychological and philosophical novel. We are following the perspective of Winston, who is a low ranking member that is part of the government and the party that is in power. We are set in a world that is in a totalitarian regime that is inspired by communist regimes that have been in place throughout Europe for a good chunk of the 20th century. Everything is under total surveillance, including people's private homes. So there are actual cameras that are filming what you do in your own house, as well as cameras outside in the street. There's basically not a single inch of space that exists without you being surveilled and without you being watched by the big brother. The party in this world is not only trying to control people's actions, but it's trying to control thought and is trying to essentially rewrite the way in which people are thinking. And this is done predominantly, or not predominantly, but in a significant way through the new language that is being used in this world, which is an adaptation of English. It's called Newspeak. And what is being done with language here is, for me, one of the most interesting things that has been brought up as an argument in this book. I don't want to spend too much time because this video is not a review on this book, but let me just give you some brief nuggets of beauty that I found in this book. So the way in which this party is essentially trying to manipulate thought is through the concept of language equals thought. So oftentimes when we talk about language, we talk about language as a means of communication. Language is a means of us expressing thought. But what Orwell is arguing here is that language is actually the creation of thought. Language is not just a mere tool that we use to express what we think, but language is essentially the vessel that allows us to think critically and to make decisions and to build our opinions. And his main criticism is that in totalitarian regimes, language is oftentimes manipulated because governments that are in power in such regimes, they know that language is a precursor for thought. There are many different ways that depict this argument that Orwell is making throughout the entirety of this book, but one of the ways is through the concept of Newspeak, which is the new language that the government is trying to put in place. So to be clear, Newspeak is not a different language. It's English, but it's English that is being restricted as much as possible. So just to give you an idea what that looks like, I'll read you a little bit of that. It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words. Of course, the great wastage is in the verbs and the adjectives, but there are hundreds of nouns that can be got rid of as well. It isn't only the synonyms, there are also the antonyms. After all, what justification is there for a word which is simply the opposite of some other word? A word contains its opposite in itself. Take good, for instance. If you have a word like good, what need is there for a word like bad? Ungood will do just as well, better, because it's its exact opposite, which the other is not. Or again, if you want a stronger version of good, what sense is there in having a whole string of vague, useless words like excellent and splendid and all the rest of them? Plus good covers the meaning. Or double plus good if you want something stronger still. So this comes from when Winston was discussing with one of his colleagues at the Ministry of Truth, and his colleague was particularly working on, I believe, a new dictionary of Newspeak where they were deleting as many words as possible. And here, his colleague is mentioning to him how Old Speak, which is regular English, has vagueness and useless shades of meaning. You don't grasp the beauty of the destruction of words. Another way in which Orwell is showing in the way in which language equals thought, or language being the thing that has to happen before thought can fully be fleshed out, happens a little bit more as a symbolic thing, and it really happens when the story begins. the whole reason why we know this story, the whole reason why we are being told what is happening in this world is because Winston has decided to write in a journal. He finds a quiet corner in his apartment that is essentially a little bit shielded from the camera, and he decides to write. Writing being something that is obviously illegal in this world. And by the fact that he's writing, you could see him become more and more therapeutically going through and processing all of the horrible things that the party is doing. Because he's literally writing these things down. So it becomes a sort of therapy for him, but it also becomes a vessel of thought because as he starts writing, as the story begins, he also starts questioning what is happening in this world. He also starts questioning what happened before the party was ruling, which is something that is not allowed. Discussing past is essentially nonsensical. Nobody does that. Nobody can question, nobody can think about what was before the party because the party is supposed to be this kind of absolute that has ever existed and will exist forever. There are so many other beautiful, amazing, thought provoking things in this book, but I just don't have the time right now to go into them. I did make a whole video on this a couple months ago when I read it, so if you're interested, you can go watch it. But this was the book that challenged me the most intellectually. I've had such an amazing time with it, and it truly just made me realize how happy and fortunate I feel that I can read all of these books and I can think about all of these different things. So we've made it to the end of the video and the end of my wrap up of 2025. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got some good recommendations from the books that I've mentioned. I hope you had a good reading year, and I hope you're also super excited for 2026. I am so excited for 2026, and I have some amazing reading goals that I will probably mention in some next videos that I'm going to film. So stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.